All right, welcome to probability. This is our last week. Well, there's still 2 weeks left in the quarter, but this is our last week that we're doing homework. So the rest of the time you can just catch up if you haven't done any, or if you've done some, you've got a couple weeks to catch up on. So probability is our last unit. The first 2 topics that we're going to cover in this lesson are theoretical probability and compound probability. So theoretical probability is just basically the probability you've been doing since you started doing probability. So we write it like this. We say the probability of an event happening. So this is our event. That's our E. And notice we usually write it with a capital letter. But here's what I always look at first. This is the denominator of our probability is always the total number of outcomes that are possible to happen. So if you're talking about rolling a dice, there's 6 different numbers on a dice, so your total outcomes would be 6. Okay, the favorable outcomes is what you put on the top. So if you say, what's the probability that I roll a 2 on a dice? Well, there's only 1 2 on a dice, so there would be a 1 on the top, and then the total outcomes is your 6. All right, we'll go into that a little bit more with some of these examples as we go on. The complement, there's one of the questions on your homework that asks you for the complement. So that is just the probability of an event not happening. Now, what you have to remember is if it is for sure that your event's going to happen, your probability is 1 or 100%. Sometimes we move the decimal over to and call it a percent. But the probability is always going to be 1 if that's what's going to happen. So the probability of something happening and something not happening is always going to add to that 1. So when you're trying to find the probability of something not happening, see that little squiggle that says that not E happens, so that you don't roll a 2, you're just going to have 1 subtract the probability that that event happens right there. All right, so let's look at a real example here. So we're going to look at this example. It says, example 1, it says a letter in the word probability is randomly selected. What is the probability of selecting a vowel? So when I always do this, I always draw my fraction lines. So notice it'll always be a fraction right there. And you can write I like to write my answers as fractions. If I did put the decimal answers in all of the problems, so if you like decimals better, that's fine. Okay, but on the bottom is the total number of outcomes. So if we're going to draw a letter, we need to know how many total letters there are. So we just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, so there are 11 different letters there in probability. If there's 2 B's, that's okay. We're just going to there's 2 of them in there. So 11 letters are possible if we select one of the letters out of the word probability. All right, so they're asking us, what's the probability that you select a vowel? So your favorable outcomes are vowels. So let's just go through here and find the ones that are vowels. Well, an O is a vowel, so there's a vowel, an A is a vowel, an I is a vowel, and another I. So notice there are 1, 2, 3, 4 of those letters that are vowels. So your probability is 4 over 11. And that's a perfectly good answer. If you want to put it into your calculator and do 4 divided by 11, it is also 0.3636. So we can just round it to 364, and that's your probability. Okay. All right, let's look at this next example. This time, this is a Venn diagram, so we're going to kind of go through it. But this Venn diagram right here shows the number of senior boys who play football or who wrestle. So this is everything inside this lovely little box here. That's the number of senior boys at our school. So it says, what's the probability if you choose one senior boy at random that he plays football but does not wrestle? So let's talk about how many boys total are at this school, senior boys there are. So it looks like there's 18 boys that are in my football circle but not in wrestling. So these 18 boys only play football. They don't wrestle. These 9 boys, notice how they're both in the football circle and in the wrestling circle. These 9 boys do both. They play football and they wrestle. These 12 are only wrestlers. And do not forget this number out here. We have 104 senior boys who do not play football and do not wrestle. Okay, so if we're looking, if we're going to choose one senior boy at random, our total outcomes down here are how many senior boys that we have. we're going to have to add all of these boys together. They did not do that for us. So we're going to add the 18 to the 9 to the 12 to the 104. And we have 143 senior boys right there. Okay, so again, we just added them all together. So we are trying to find the probability that one of those senior boys plays football and does not wrestle. Okay, so our favorable outcomes are football players that do not wrestle. Well, how many football players, how many people in this lovely circle right here are not in the wrestling circle? Well, that's our 18. So 18 is just going to go on the top there. And that's all that you do to find that probability. Again, if you want to write it as a decimal, 18 divided by 143, you could write 0.1258. So we'll round it to 6. All right. Stay tuned for a compound probability coming up next.